It's the Almost Perfect Podcast.
Welcome to the Almost Perfect Podcast, a celebration of fuck-ups, failures, and falling flat on your face. This is a podcast that believes you can learn from experience, but that experience doesn't have to be your own. Hi, I'm Bob Perfect, and I'm a functional fuck-up. Let's learn from somebody else's mistakes. And today we're learning from Ciarán Slemon, aka Parabyl, who is a musician and the Almost Perfect youth group leader. That's a deep cut. It's not even that deep a cut. You can just listen to like previous episodes, pretty recent ones, to get that one. But yeah, Parabyl is a musician and an autodidact of sorts. He's someone who teaches himself a lot of different things and has learnt a lot in his short life so far, and he's grown a hell of a lot in his music career in the 5 years that he's been making music. So yeah, he's someone who's been a supporter of this podcast for a long time, and we actually chat a little bit in the beginning about how we've interwoven a little bit. I've written about Parabyl back in the day, and I've kind of forgot about it. And by kind of forgot about it, I did, because I write about a lot of music. But I wrote about a track of his on a compilation. And then last year I wrote about Dispersion, which is a really good release that you should go check out right now. And yeah, man, this is a fucking dope chat. Like we go all over the show a little bit. But yeah, Ciarán is someone whose vibe I've enjoyed for a while. Like I pick up what he's putting down, and we've had some cool conversations in the DMs, and like I say, I just really enjoy his music, so I figured he'd be a good person to get on the podcast. And he offers a lot of different perspectives, he's a bit of an old soul and a young buddy in a lot of ways, but yeah, he's used this time quite well. I'm ruining the whole podcast. I'm just telling you everything that happens in the podcast, so I'll let him tell you his story just now. This is a listener-supported podcast, which means it is supported by you, and you can do that by going to patreon.com/almostperfect and subscribing for as little as $1 a month. $1, 14 Rand, 15 Rand, sometimes 16 Rand, sometimes it's 17 Rand. Either way, it's about the price of a beer. So if you dig this vibe, if you enjoy the conversation you hear, maybe go back and listen to some other ones. If you're a new listener, go listen to the Moonchild one. That one was last week. That's dope. There's a lot of really cool conversations that we've had. And yeah, you can support the podcast by going to patreon.com/almostperfect. You can also just follow us on the internet. We're trying to get to 500 followers on Twitter by the end of the year. We're on 400 and something. So if you don't follow us on Twitter yet, Almost Perfect ZA is the account to go follow. And lastly, because there's charts and things like that that matter, if you want to listen to this on, Apple Podcasts, you can do that. I'm not saying you should or have to or anything like that, but it's an option. And it's an option that would help me out a little bit in terms of charts and ratings and those sorts of things. Not that that necessarily matters, but it also kind of does. So yeah, there should be a link on the website that says listen to this on the podcasting platform of your choice, or you can just click the iTunes button that should be in the top right, if I remember how I put everything together. Cool. So that's what we got going on for you. That's the vibe. I've had a bit of an interesting week in that nothing has happened. I've been at home and quarantining because I was in contact with someone who was in contact with people who had COVID, and so I couldn't stay at my grand's anymore. And some of you know that I've been staying at my grandparents' place because my grand got hit by a car. Obviously, that's fucking horrific. And she's, not able to really walk, and she's had to go to hospital. And so I've also had to look after my grandfather, who's got skin cancer. And yeah, that's been quite a hectic vibe. Not gonna lie, not a good time. Not good times at all. But yeah, I had to leave because didn't want to potentially infect them with COVID. So I've been at home for the last week, and then I'm heading back there tomorrow because the person who I was in contact with doesn't have it. They tested negative, and I haven't shown any symptoms. So I'm going back to help my gran and grandfather probably for another week or two. We'll see how it goes. And yeah, I've enjoyed the time that I've had to myself again, even though it's also been incredibly anxiety inducing, and I felt a bit useless not being able to help when my grandparents needed help, but other people have stepped up to the plate in the family. They've filled in for the last week, and I'm going to be going back there tomorrow. So, yeah, that's kind of what I've had going on. In that time, I've managed to catch up on a bit of work that I've had. So you should be able to read an interview with Push on OK Africa soon as the edits get approved. And what else? I've been playing Apex Legends. I'm not gonna lie to you. I've spent a lot of time playing Apex Legends. I was jamming with Mojak and Eric the other night. Eric Jansen and Mojak Lohoko, both ex-guests of this podcast. So you can go listen to that. And that was just... I'm not gonna lie. Yeah, that was just something... I've really enjoyed being able to connect with people through games in this pandemic, essentially. So yeah, that's been what I've been getting up to. What have you been doing? I assume you haven't been going out. Please tell me you haven't been going out. You're just chilling at home, relaxing by the pool or a friend's pool, or putting a bucket of water outside and stepping in that. I don't know what the situation is for you, but yeah, please, like you see the things, the things. Do I need to really lecture people? Because I do in my Instagram stories, and some people get annoyed with it, but at the same time it's like, come on, please just chill for a bit. Just chill for the next few months, and then we can all go back to normal-ish, or something better than before. But it doesn't seem like we're going to go back to something better than before, so I don't know. We'll see. This shit's definitely made me lose faith. Not really faith, but just I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed, with society and the way a lot of people I respect have treated this thing, and not much I can really do about it. I've just got to try and do what I think is right, essentially. And what I think is right is not performing and not bringing people together and all of those things. And yeah, as much as it's made this year a lot more difficult in a lot of ways, like I've lost jobs. I had a festival that I put on every year that I'm probably not going to do ever again. Things we lost in the pandemic, but there's also a lot of things we've gained, and that's actually something that Ciarán and I chat on in this podcast. Yeah, I brought it back. Anyway, it's time for the shout-outs, and this is because on patreon.com/almostperfect, there is a tier. It's called the titular titles tier, and it's a $10 tier that allows you to become a part of the cast and crew, and that's why Ciarán Slemon is the Almost Perfect youth group leader. We've also got the Chief Sales Officer of Subtle Heresies in the Greater Overberg region, that is Rousseau. We have got Julian, who is the king, and we have got Stephen Olafia, who is the executive producer. We've also got Vishendra Naidu. Shout out to Vishendra Naidu. He's the spiritual advisor. And the newest member of the Almost Perfect team is our pantsless weasel, Ciarán Love. So shout out to all of you. Your support, especially through this year, has been so fucking appreciated. And trust me, it's helped more than you'll ever know. So thank you so much, and thank you to everyone else that signed up to the Patreon, and thank you to you for listening to this so far. It's about to get really good, because here comes the Almost Perfect podcast with Parabyl. So how are you living, Ciarán?
I'm living good, Bob. I'm as we've just chatted about, doing pretty chilled at the moment. Not so much going on, kind of taking it easy.
Behind the curtain that we talked beforehand.
Yeah, a little behind the scenes. Doing particularly well though, just to be on here. Thanks for having me on. I'm a first time caller, long time listener.
Yeah, that's the thing. You've actually been someone who's encouraged me a lot with this podcast, and this is definitely in a weird way a thank you, but also at the same time I dig your work. So it's not like I'm doing you a favor here, it's just the thing of I really do enjoy your work. And I mean, I found you probably last year, but I saw your name around before that, I saw your name quite a bit in the circles. And yeah, your Dispersion EP, was it EP or was it an album?
Bit of both, but EP is good, yeah.
With a long EP, short album kind of situation. I remember that just being something that, yeah, like really struck a chord with me. But you've been in the game for about 5 years, I understand, maybe a bit longer now.
Yeah, I would say maybe about 5 years, kind of, semi-officially. I was looking up an old review on Bubblegum Club of this Sleepwalker Records compilation from, I don't know when, like probably like 2016. And I noticed that you had written it. And that's probably actually how I first stumbled across you, conversely. And you'd mentioned my track. You're like, this one's kind of like a standout on it. I thought that was a very sweet kind of full circle vibe when I noticed that.
I'm so sorry. Like, I don't remember, like, yeah, that there. But your name was something that stuck in my head for a while. I didn't realize that long ago I'd actually heard you and dug your music. That's awesome.
A weird little coincidence there.
Like, see, that's the thing. I'm a stoner, man. Like, I don't remember past last week half the time.
No, I'm getting there. I'm pretty much the same at this point, especially after how this year's been.
Yeah, because from what I understand, you've been on a bit of a sabbatical of sorts. Like, you quit your job, and yeah, now you've been discovering yourself, but there's a bit of pressure to get a job again. So yeah, tell me about that situation.
Yeah, it's been interesting as I've been kind of fortunate to have some savings lined up when the kind of workplace shifting that's been happening a lot this year occurs. I'm very thankful to be kind of I would say, it being my first kind of 9 to 5 job with a paycheck, like very fortunate compared to a lot of people. And I've had a lot of time since to, as you said, yeah, like kind of work on myself and see what's up and see what's going on. And I've always find like periods of being unemployed to be, they can kind of go both ways, but they're generally a kind of a pretty interesting time to kind of see what's going on. And like, while I haven't been making much music this time, I think DJing has been, like, I bought myself a controller at some point in lockdown, and that's just been a completely new like wave that I've been going down and riding, which is loads of fun.
What made you go that route?
I mean, like gigging in Cape Town and stuff. I don't know. I've never really had an inclination to like play my own music, at least as Parabyl. So
what was the plan when you started making music? Were you just like, I just want to make some stuff in my bedroom and put it out there?
Pretty much, yeah. I don't know if you know Boards of Canada, the Scottish duo.
I'm not familiar with them.
They're like kind of came up alongside Aphex Twin. That era, I'd say the more like ambient twist to kind of an Aphex Twin or an Autechre. And I've idolized them a lot, and they're extremely kind of reclusive, like it turns out they're brothers, but this wasn't known about them for like 20, 25 years into their career. And I think that was initially the plan, but I realized like it doesn't kind of take you very far.
You can't really do that from South Africa. Like, I know so many people have tried to do the different identity thing, and they realize, yeah, like in South Africa, you just can't do that for some reason. Like, people don't buy into it, or they do, but it's like Jack Sparrow, like, and you still got to be a person there. You can't be this mysterious force that doesn't exist,
No, exactly. And yeah, like now that you put it that way, I was a huge fan of like Daft Punk and Deadmau5 as a teenager, and like the idea of the masks and shit like that. Yeah, it doesn't work when everyone knows you, because Cape Town's so tiny.
Not just Cape Town, South Africa in general, and especially in the art scene, like everything crosses over so much. Like, you become so familiar with people, and like it's hard to even have personas, because you get to know the people behind the persona pretty quickly and pretty early on, because you're sharing the same backstages or you're at the same festivals and those sorts of situations. So it's like the mystique is ruined like so quickly.
It really is. It's like, I think kind of happening to end up gigging both kind of as Parabyl and with Three Witches, which is a band I was in. It's been interesting experiencing exactly that, where like I'll meet these people that, say like my older cousin knew when I was younger and was like, oh, this is a dope South African act, or like someone I saw in like a early YouTube clip or like a DVD that came with a magazine or something. And it's like, very kind of exciting and awe-inspiring at first, but then it can get a bit, depending on what they're like in real life, it can go one or two ways, you know.
Yeah, they say never meet your heroes, and especially not if they're in the South African music scene. Like,
it's very true.
it's gonna get a little awkward at times. But have you found? Well, I mean, so you started gigging, you started doing live stuff before lockdown, and now you figured, let me hone my skills.
Yeah, I'd say exactly that. I also just like the idea of sitting and DJing and playing music for oneself, you know. It's I would say sorry,
I was gonna say I enjoy doing that with virtual DJ. I won't lie. Like, even to de-stress recently, it's something that's just because I've DJ'd at times, but I don't have the ears for it, man. Like, I just don't. Like, I don't hear the things that people hear. Like, I can't distinguish all the different sounds that are coming. And like, I'm keeping the beats, but I know I need to like mix in this thing and mix in that thing and change the tone here and like all the different stuff. But I do enjoy like mixing different songs together as best I can. Like, in virtual DJ, it's so therapeutic.
It's loads of fun. I mean, I played a good number, or like a majority of my gigs, I just play it on a laptop with Tractor, and like I have a little MIDI keyboard where the different piano keys are like cue points and play and pause and stuff, like completely retrofitted, and it's the most fun thing. Which is why I was like, cool, let me buy like a bit of a nicer controller and try and learn to properly DJ.
You strike me as someone who might have built their own MIDI keyboard out of a like Raspberry Pi or something. And
Definitely,
I don't know like
close.
what you'd make it out of, but yeah, like, was that the situation or nah?
Not quite. It's like I'm using essentially like a little piano keyboard to do all the buttons in the DJing software. So in that way, it's pretty like it. I spent good couple of weeks setting it up myself when I was first kind of getting into it, but I quickly realized like it's not going to work long term.
But you're someone who does like getting into the weeds, right? Like, you strike me as someone who digs deep, because just from your music and then like everything else I've kind of seen about you, you seem like, you lock yourself away and just absorb like whatever it is that you're interested in. Yeah,
no, some of my friends used to call me Mr. Facts, because like I've just got I think it started a lot with nature documentaries and shit as a kid. I'd be like, I want to know what every single animal can do and like what they're good at, what they're bad at, kind of like a little scorecard in a way.
Yeah, I think I was a bit annoying with my knowledge, because my friends used to like make fun of me because I would be the guy who always read it in a book. Because it'd be like they'd be like, "Oh, how do you know that?" I'd be like, "Oh, I read it in a book." So eventually, they would just like tune me that. Like, that would be like the diss. Yeah. Oh, I read it in a book. It's like, what the fuck? Why are you making fun of me for reading? Like, what is going on here? Like, this is so weird. But that is growing up.
No, it really is. I definitely, as soon as I discovered computers, I kind of like forgot about reading, and I was a big reader as a kid. And I think definitely part of that is just it not being cool, you know?
But then also computers, like I had like that same thing. Like, I got my first computer probably when I was like 15, 16, I think. But like, I'd been doing computers at school since like grade 6 or maybe grade before that, and I would literally, like, if I didn't even have internet at home, like when I did get a computer, so I would go to internet cafes and like save the web pages that I wanted to read to like a floppy disk at the time and take them home and like read stuff that way. That way I'd be able to, like, it was basically Magic Strategy a lot of the time. Like, I'd go to this website called Star City Games and just like download all the like web pages with all the articles and then go home and just read like all this stuff. And eventually I learned a little bit about like, how a computer worked, but I never took it that far. Whereas you seem to be deep into the matrix.
Yeah, I had a similar experience of like my mom's quite a hippie, quite anti-computers, but we did have like a computer growing up, or like one of her work laptops to use. And then eventually I bought this shitty old PC from my friend's dad's office kind of vibe. And I would go to LANs and stuff, and it would just break down all the time. So I kind of had to learn how to
You were
fix
that
it on the
guy.
fly. Like if I'm out, a good hour's drive from home and set it up and it just doesn't work, you could be like, cool, like no one else is going to help me. I just kind of have to see what's going on inside it. And it's helped in the long term.
Yeah, because everyone else is going to just be like, nah, I want to play games.
Literally.
You are taking up my time.
Yeah.
Oh man, it's weird. Like they say, like, necessity breeds invention, and that's the thing. Like when you have no other options, you learn how to adjust and fix things, and that's kind of become your career. What's like I know you work in SEO. I know you I'm not too sure what else, web development, but yeah, look, what's been the thing that you actually did as a job that came out of your nerdiness as a kid?
Well, initially I was hired as just like a content writer because I've also
Oh wow.
been quite, I guess, like my mom's an English teacher and I've always had kind of a thing for language. So it was a content writing job, but I guess with the in that I was a tech savvy person and written for like some gaming websites and done, some like cursory kind of digital work and like half a graphic design degree.
Oh wow.
So yeah, it was like a little startup where they kind of train you up. I was content writing and then doing SEO and then onto like more technical SEO. And then by the time I left, it was pretty clear that I was going to like become a web developer eventually. So that's kind of where I'm headed at the moment. Yeah, which has been a complete rabbit hole in kind of the opposite direction of music, which I think has been nice to have a distraction from this year,
Yeah, especially this year. But how do you balance that? Like I don't know, like you were saying, like you wanted to just be a bedroom like person anyway, so it makes sense to do it, making music and then also coding essentially. But SEO is such a deep well, and it's something I don't fucking understand anymore. Like in the early days I kind of got it, but now I also just hate the way it's influenced writing. Like that's I think the thing that like frustrates me the most is like how your first paragraph has to like read a certain way so that Google like says yes to it. Like I don't know how much you've dealt with that.
Yeah, we like I think just from even like probably like 2 years exposure to it on a regular basis, I kind of see how and why content and entertainment has dipped or taken certain routes on the internet, or why, for example, like I think it's changing now with YouTube ads and everything, but videos are kind of more preferable to reading an article often, because when you search for an article, you're kind of just bombarded with stuff that's like elbowing its way in there, a million ads, and I could really go on about it.
Subscribe to my fucking thing. Like that is the I don't understand. I haven't read the article yet. Like put that at the bottom. Like just, hey, did you enjoy this? Cool, check this stuff out. But now I don't understand it. It doesn't work. It can't work. How does that work? Who does that not annoy? Like who is the person who that thing comes up on the first thing you see and doesn't immediately just click off the site? Like
and I think it's that same kind of that commercial aspect is also what initially drove me away from graphic design when I was studying it, because I feel like I want to be making stuff and not like selling people stuff,
not designing another logo every week essentially. Like no disrespect to people who do that and love it, but it is one of those things that like if you have a certain perspective, it's not fun, it's not enjoyable, it's not like you don't get that same thrill that other people do. So it's better to go towards the things that actually do work for you. But like I was saying with SEO, like another thing that I hate is the article naming conventions now, like title conventions. You're never gonna get like a good headline again.
No, it's really frustrating, and you see it bleeding into like news sites even and stuff like that. It's really it's a pretty shitty situation overall. But I'm hoping to be getting some replies back from jobs soon relating to something a little bit more creative and interesting.
Sweet, man. So how's this sabbatical been for you? You said you were learning to DJ a bit more and that. What else have you done?
Aside from that, I mean, it's been a lot of learning. I'm kind of like an obsessive self-learner. So I mean, aside from all the kind of work related stuff or like career related stuff, I would say like listening to a hell of a lot of music and still doing, you know, deep dives and furiously trying to keep up with all the local music that gets released, because I like to try
It's
and listen to everything.
It's impossible now.
It's
like,
so difficult.
It's genuinely gotten to a point where there's just so much good stuff out there that's like, yeah, a lot of it is going to fall through the cracks of even, you know, the good music sites, essentially, because there isn't enough time in the day to listen to all the good South African music now.
Yeah, and I think like it's great ways are, you know, there's like been a lot of virtual sets, virtual parties, things like that, which you always kind of get reminded like, oh, this person who I've completely forgotten about, who's still releasing, still making incredible music. Yeah, I think aside from that, I'd really just been spending a lot of time DJing and then selectively spending some time writing music, but only kind of trying to do it when it works, because like this whole lockdown period I was just not really able to write music, and then trying to like force myself to do it just kind of made it worse in a way.
Really? Yeah. I kind of get that, because I've gone through so many different things in this lockdown as well, and trying to do creative stuff. I mean, I opened up my one-man show for the first time in like a year, like yesterday, and I've got some notes and stuff like that in my, like I use Trello for my jokes and that, and I've got like maybe 5 notes that I've written in this last like 6 months that I can take forward and create jokes with and that. But like, yeah, before this, like even before like this week, essentially, I have not been able to really, like, I've done like some jokes and stuff, but every time I sit down to try and like actually like come up with stuff, it was just like painful. And eventually I was just like, you know what, I'll wait.
Yeah, no, I feel like I need external stimulation to like a much larger degree to kind of get, not, I wouldn't say even inspired, but just like in the right kind of headspace to be thinking creatively. And like, yeah, there's so many people who this year have like, I guess, gone the other way, where they're absolutely killing it, and this is just the perfect space for them. And I kind of thought it would be, because I'm a pretty insular and like pretty solitary person, but just it's just like that lack of anything exciting happening, and not hearing like music on crazy big speakers, and you know, all those little details.
Yeah, man, just not being a part of society, like in a IRL way. Like, it's been wonderful. Like you say, the virtual sets and that, I've been put onto people I had no clue even existed, or, you know, I'd seen their names, but I didn't know that they were that good. Like, you know, I really got put onto some interesting stuff. And like, I can't wait to be able to actually go and experience that in real life. And yeah, the conversations you have in real life, because it's also, I think that's one of the things, it's hard to be creative when everything's just the same, like over and over again, even the conversations that I have, you know, being had online and stuff like that.
Exactly.
And when you get to like actually talk to someone, when you get to actually sit down and go out, like you come across new ideas, and like I get you, like you be able to, and it's just nice to fucking be social with people and not be stressed about like, killing like everyone.
That's the thing. I've been, I didn't realize I actually am, like, as much as I still am an introvert, like I'm a pretty social one, and it's something that I think it's a nice thing about like this year, that I've kind of realized I do actually enjoy it and like it, as much as it's not always like convenient in my mind to do, you know, like it just makes such a huge difference in every aspect.
Yeah, I think I read some stuff like early on where they were saying like, you know, introverts are actually going to struggle like with this, and I can't remember the whole thing, so I don't know why I'm bringing it up, but the vibe was essentially just that like, you know, just because you're introverted doesn't mean you don't need, you know, your social interactions. It's just when you go, like, it's how you go out, it's where you go out, those sorts of things matter. And like, but it's introverted people doesn't mean you don't like going out. It doesn't mean you don't like experiencing cool shit. Like,
exactly.
You know?
Exactly.
Yeah. your journey with music started like with international stuff that like what was it, like wave music, I think
Yeah.
it's called.
So
What is wave music? Because I at this point don't even know like what anything is. Like
I think
genres pop up every day.
probably like it's most often described as like emotional, bassy, kind of like futuristic sounding music. So
Okay.
to give a bit of context, there was like out of SoundCloud genres, Witch House has like, I would say, quite a particularly abrasive sound. I'm not sure if you've ever been into Witch House or even know what it is or what.
I know what it is. I have not been into it. No.
Okay. Yeah, it's like, weird recycled Euro kind of 2000 sounds, recontextualized, like quite
it's
a
also
heavy...
the people that tend to dig it, like just when people are vibe with. And I'm one of those people who like, if a certain type of person likes something, I'm almost always skeptical of that thing, like I write it off before giving it a chance, which is unfair.
I'm the same.
But also in some ways, it's just there's only so much time, No,
definitely. Like I know exactly what you mean, but yeah, it's I think it would be best described as like the kind of beats that Young Lean would rap over.
Okay, snap.
Yeah, I was into the whole kind of like sad boys, SoundCloud wave kind of vibe, and I was at a certain point in high school trying to be like a SoundCloud rapper, but I realized pretty quickly that like this just wasn't going to be a look, so I kind of like stuck with the beatsy side of stuff,
What was it about rapping that didn't work for you?
I really enjoyed it and everything, and I would say like I'm still a pretty good like lyricist, like I can write well, but I remember bumping into Rais from Crayons one evening, and I'd like gone to school with his brother, so he kind of knew that I was like trying to rap, and he said to me, he was just like, like, why don't you rap in a South African accent? Like everyone does this kind of Americanized thing, and I was like, yeah, I don't really have an answer to that, and it kind of just like stuck with me, and I realized like, yeah, there was too much of a kind of imposter vibe for me. And I think looking at how a lot of like SoundCloud rappers now, especially coming from places like outside of America, like I get very turned away by that whole Americanism aspect of everything, like down to the accent.
Yeah, I get that, because you also, if you look at what's really worked and what's really popped off, it is stuff that's done in its own cadence and its own like accents of where you're from, using the language of your hometown. And that becomes like international. But then someone in France is busy rapping about Atlanta slang essentially, and with an American accent. And same thing here, someone in Joburg is doing that right now.
I mean, like so a lot of the popular rappers in South Africa, and it kind of bothers me now. Like it's really stuck with me for a while, and I think it's really weird that rap being kind of one of the most respected forms of modern storytelling to like be all so shrouded in like, never mind just like white lies and putting on a persona, but to the point of like who you rapping for. If you're rapping about South Africa in an American accent, it's like it's all confused to me.
Yeah, but people are trying to do it for international appeal as well, like that's why like someone like Nasty C, like I don't think he wanted to be a South African rapper necessarily, and also he says he grew up on Lil Wayne and that kind of stuff, trying to emulate those sorts of things. So I get it, you're listening to these things and you're trying to sound like that. I mean, you look at like fucking Tweak. I don't know if you ever heard the band Tweak, and then they became Crash Car Burn, which was like essentially Blink becoming what was it, like Angels in Airwaves. Like they did the same fucking thing. Like Finkelsteins as well. Like we just had so many South African bands that tried to sound American, and it's because that's what influences you, But I'm with you, man. Like what really pops off and what really makes stuff dope is when you take your own influences and you take the sounds, like you can take what other people have done before and then you inject a little bit of you into it, and then it becomes something new.
Exactly. Like I think I've always wanted to just make music that is kind of different to what what someone might have heard before. And there was maybe a point where like doing a young, lean, mishmash Atlanta, South Africa vibe, maybe that was a thing at some point, but I don't think now it's really offering a huge amount of anything novel to the conversation.
Yeah, when you're young, like that's what you should do almost. You should be mimicking what other people have done just to try and like learn the skills, essentially. I mean, I know like in comedy that's something, and in writing, geez, in every single thing. I know actors who do that. You take your favorite actors and you pretend to be them until you can find yourself within it. And I think with music, I guess it's the same thing. Like, I'm sure there's within wave music, like people who influenced you heavily in the beginning, right?
Oh yeah, no, definitely. I mean, that kind of feeds in a similar way into the other conversation where, like, I think the idea of like a very small SoundCloud genre having a label, like, and having a name to it and a specific sound when it was like so young, really, like I was for a long time just like everyone else, kind of mimicking like the main 4 or 5 people who were biggest in the scene. And so I've been also just trying to let that go a little bit, and instead of being like, cool, I've got these like Russian and Polish kids on SoundCloud who are following me, who I should be making music for, rather just be like, okay, it doesn't have to be like with the rap thing, like it doesn't have to be this or that. Let me just try and make something new and different based on kind of like what I'm into at the moment.
But how does that work, like when you're actually creating stuff? Like, do you actually think, oh no, this sounds a bit too much like this thing that I've been listening to, let me change it up? Or what's the creative process like there?
I think it's often more a retrospective thing. So like,
okay,
now if I go back through my SoundCloud, I can kind of hear like there's some songs where I'm like, oh, that's clear rip of like, this famous wave song. But I think overall I've just been trying to not be so restricted by genre in retrospect. And then often I really think I've kind of made something different, and I'm like, oh, this sounds like really unique, and this sounds so different from what I usually do. And then I'll listen to it 6 months down the line, I'll be like, it actually doesn't kind of sound that different, so let me like drive it a little bit further. And I think especially this year, a lot of the music I've been working on is, I would say, a bit more of a like departure from anything like too similar to what I've done before.
In what ways?
I think in terms of just, you probably wouldn't place it in the same sonic palette. And like I've always, especially with Three Witches, like made a lot of music that I don't release. Like that song that I mentioned earlier that you mentioned in a review a couple of years ago was like it's like a disco kind of song where I was singing and whatnot. And like, I'd really love to just kind of break away from this idea of like, oh, I've built up this very small following on one platform, so like let me curate my output just to serve that kind of group of people.
How much of that is a thing? Like, because, okay, I don't know. Like, I had the idea that most people are like going that way, but is it a thing of like people are still stuck in their genres, like in terms of fans, like in terms of listeners, like that they, are fans of a genre and they listen to that genre and don't really go outside of much? Or what's the vibe there?
I don't think so. Like I think that's changing a hell of a lot, and there's like certain random people whose names I just know from kind of supporting me on Bandcamp or whatever, who I can tell, like, even if I release something completely in a different lane, like the track I did with Tara and Albany Law, which is like a housey track, they were still into it because they were into like my music, regardless of what that sounds like in a way. But I think it's difficult when you're trying to promote music and like establish a name for yourself, because it's like, if I've got this strange kind of nondescript, it's not trap, but it's not drum and bass, it's not this and that. I mean, like, where do you promote it? How do you describe it to people? It's so frustrating when people ask me to describe the kind of music I make, especially if they're not kind of like up to date with what's happening in music, because it's very difficult without being like, oh, it's hip hop, it's R&B, it's house, etc.
Yeah, that's why like I try to even just avoid genre when I'm writing like about music as much as possible. I'll use overarching terms like
like electronica. Like for you, like I would definitely just place you in electronica.
Right, that's a
which
great
I know
label,
is
I think.
yeah, it's just broad as fuck. But then you can hone it in by just describing what it sounds like to you. Like, you know, like what it like brings up. You don't, that's for me at least as a music writer, like, because I don't know that much about the actual making of music. And I
Right.
think in a weird way that's a strength, because also like I'm not as, so I don't fucking bore, in my opinion, the reader with technical shit that they don't care about. Instead you try and just accentuate what the person's done and like write about how they've, I don't know, yeah, just like, yeah, what impact it's had on you. But then you find it gets so lazy when people are just like, you know, this drum and bass track by so and so, and it's 100 words and fucking that's it. Like that's the entire engagement with the work.
No, there's definitely some levels to music journalism in South Africa, and I think it definitely, I won't say like overall, but often I wonder if this idea was pushed more, that I think, you know, would it kind of open up people's ears in a way, because I imagine most of the writers are pretty open to kind of hearing whatever, but they don't necessarily all come across that way, you know.
That's interesting. I didn't realize that. I mean, I started off very much in my genres, like basically indie hardcore rock, because that's what I was comfortable with. But I mean, I was listening to so much other stuff as well, and like, so I mean, and in terms of those genres, like I can like if you want to talk hardcore, like I can break it the fuck down, you know, like into like New York 80s, whatever, you know, like I've got that history and stuff, so I could, but at the same time, I'd rather just say like this band sounds like a fucking train ran through you, because that's
just it just rolls off the tongue so much better, you know, and you get what the person's talking about, even if you don't understand the music itself.
Exactly, but I find, I don't know, like journalism, like it's an interesting thing for you for as a, you know, artist, because so many people, well, yeah, a lot of people have written about you. You do have quite a lot of like positive reviews and stuff. And I guess sometimes it can feel like, oh, this is well-meaning and this is nice, but this person doesn't understand what I've done here at all.
Yeah, I suppose so. I think, I mean, even if they don't understand what has happened at all, like I think I still really appreciate, obviously, just like the support that it is given from the local scene. And I remember like a couple of years ago kind of being like, cool, how do I get on magazines and stuff and on blogs? And I realized a lot of these places just had submissions pages, and I've established some really lovely relationships with different publications. But I don't know, there's definitely a crossover between, I would say, maybe someone who would write really well about certain types of, maybe like, you know, to put it literally, like painting and visual arts, and not so well about music, but with an interest in both. And like I can't complain about any of the reviews I've gotten. Like they've all been very kind of like well-meaning, and even if they haven't necessarily been positive, I think it's come from a good place. But I think, more so, maybe I'm just like snobby about my standard of reviewing, and like it's something that I would love to do myself. I feel like it's best to steer clear of for me.
Yeah, as an artist, I don't know if you can reasonably do it, like without just opening yourself up to not criticism, but like just jabs. You know, like I think as an artist within the same genre, because I know there was a comedian who had a blog back in the day, and he used to review comedy shows in South Africa, because well-meaning, you know, to try and like up the level and also, you know, publicize stuff and let people know and this and that. But other comedians took offense when he, you know, gave his criticism. And dangerous game to be playing in a small scene, I guess.
I don't think it's wise to be on both sides of the coin like that.
But it is important to share like the other stuff that's out there and give your opinion on it. And it's just, like, it's awkward to, like, I guess private conversations are the way to like actually give proper criticism within the scene.
Most definitely, yeah.
Like have you had like any of the older people, you don't have to mention names or anything, but like, yeah, like people sit you aside and be like, hey, this is how you do things, or
I mean,
I think you should like try this out, or
yeah, I think number one shout out in that regard goes to Alvin, who runs Uppercut here in Cape Town. He's been, I would say, like quite a mentor in terms of like, he's, maybe he wouldn't use this word, but like an old head. I think he has a real knowledge and understanding of hip hop and satellite genres, but also he's like, I don't know anyone as supportive of like what kids are doing in Cape Town, and like referring to myself as a kid.
But did he instill the old headness in you? Because you've definitely got a little old head in your young soul there.
I think he's definitely helped kind of do the inverse of what he's doing, where he's like, it's cool, it's great that you're up to date on what's happening now, but like know your context and know your history. Yeah, and I'd say, you know, you pick up things from just being out and around and chatting to people, and like there's often, I've noticed there's that sense often in a group being out and about where there's maybe someone there who's got like a little bit more experience, someone who's been through kind of the local music scene a bit more, and that often the tone of what they're saying just does kind of switch when it's a bunch of young musicians around, and it starts to become this like natural knowledge sharing thing.
Okay, not like a patronizing thing, because that
No.
kind of happen.
I mean, you know, it happens, but for the most part, it's been positive.
That's surprising considering you're in Cape Town. Like, you know, I would have expected a few older people to be annoying about things, but I've also just seen you getting a lot of support online on that. So I was also just wondering, like, has anyone, like, been like in terms of like production tips or anything like that, like being like, yo, try this out, or have you found most of that stuff all on your own?
I don't. I feel people don't like criticize music even in a positive way unless you really ask them to. It's something that I struggle with a lot, like getting constructive feedback from people. You know, I'll send like the collective and part of Cape Club has a WhatsApp group, and like that's one of the few places where I can send something and people would be like, no, this is bad, like you got to work on this is what's wrong there. But yeah, most people really don't, unless you like, you know, you really got to like coax it out of them.
Yeah, because like I was saying, it's dangerous. I was just reminded now of a time, like I think a comedian sent me something asking for honest advice, but like, well, honest criticism, but I didn't realize they were asking for honest criticism. And so like I was just like, oh, dope, like cool. Like, and I think they immediately got that I wasn't feeling it. But yeah, I should have followed through and been like, this is why I think, and blah blah blah. But you don't want to hurt feelings. You don't want to. It's such a silly thing. But because the thing is, like, because it's also, the thing is though, like, you also don't want that person thinking it's coming from a place of jealousy or ego and stuff like that. And like, it's so difficult actually finding those relationships that you can have with people where you can genuinely get criticism. And I've been kind of lucky with this podcast where I've had like listeners who have been like, yo, maybe cut this out, maybe try and not do that, like And so for me, that's been the best, like, essentially mentorship I've had, like, for this podcast at least, has just been the audience.
Yeah, I think there is one story that stands out in that regard, which is Ashik, Broken Transient, was at a Button Bashers that I was playing at, or like participating in, where they get like 4 producers all to flip a sample, then they play them to the club, and depending on like how loud people cheer. Yeah, it's loads of fun. But yeah, I came off, I think it was like the second one that I did, and everyone was like, you know, as they are, everyone's like, great job, like amazing stuff, amazing, incredible. And Ashik came up, and Ashik was like, what was going on with your kick? Like, how did you leave the house and bring that here and play it? And it was so refreshing just to have someone be like, yo, like that was whack, and no one else is going to tell you that it's whack, so I'm going to do you the honest thing and tell you.
I guess like in music, that's the thing. It's hard to kind of know if it's a bad night, you know, like with the crowd, or if you're just whack. Whereas like in comedy, you kind of know immediately, like if you're doing well or not. Like, it's immediately fucking apparent that like, no, people aren't fucking with this. But sometimes when you're behind the decks, I guess you don't necessarily know, and some people are vibing out, and like also, you know, sometimes I guess people aren't that aware. Like I know like Jumping Back Slash always talks about clanging it and stuff like that, and a lot of time people don't even fucking know that you fucked up. Like so,
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, but yeah, you can also definitely be having, I think, too much fun behind the decks. You get a little bit too sauced up, you know, and you.
Oh yeah.
Just, you know, you always need an honest soul to come over and be like, hey, you know, read the room, see what's going on.
Oh shit, that reminds me, like I was DJing at Mealy Pop, and once again didn't pick up what was actually being said, but Hank, who booked Mealy Pop, because he had me on at like 7 or whatever, like before who was it, 5FM DJ, but anyway, I can't remember right now. But yeah, like I start, like there were 2 girls that were vibing out to the stuff I was playing. It was like Ricky Rick and other stuff like that. And like, you know, I progressively picked it up, but it was 7 o'clock, you know, at night. So eventually it was a pretty heavyish kind of vibe, like heavy, like grimy essentially. And yeah, I had like 2 girls vibing out hard to it, and then Hank was like, "Yo, this is pretty heavy for this time." Man. I was like, "Yeah, but they're enjoying it," and then just carried on. Like, did not know that what he was saying there was maybe play something a bit more chilled, bro.
Yeah,
like so.
When you're enjoying
I assume
yourself,
you've had situations like that.
I mean, I think not so much here. Like I don't know. I've often played like the opening, middle of the night, and sometimes like the late night. But yeah, there's been a couple times playing with when I was in Three Witches where we were kind of gigging as a electronic duo, but in kind of the rock circuit in Cape Town, or like I would say more like the psych rock, surf rock circuit.
So that time period, because it was like an indie scene and then it turned into a psych rock scene. Like it was literally the exact same people.
Yeah, all the bands just
I remember you guys.
Fuck.
I know what bands you were in. Like, I remember how you dressed last week. Anyway.
But yeah, we definitely played a couple of shows there where it was like 6 wide-eyed people at the bar and not feeling it. But we were always like, we're just going to ride it as hard as possible. Like, instead of like double down rather than, you know, mellowing things out for the rest of the show, just keep bring it up a level. And yeah, that's, I think sometimes, I mean, maybe not at a nice big festival you've been booked to play at, but I think it's a valid option a lot of the time.
What, to just go for it?
Just go for it.
Like
if it's really that bad, like hopefully the promoter will say something a bit more, you know, a bit less vague to you.
It's kind of like just staring into the skid, like in comedy. Like if it's going bad, you just like go hard.
Just go for it. Like can't freeze up there.
Oh man. So Three Witches, who else was in that with you?
That was me and my mate Johnny. We kind of launched with an album with Sarah, but it was like a collab album. She wasn't like technically part of the band as much as she's been like a very big part of it over the while. Yeah.
Okay, Johnny who?
Johnny Kutsudas. He was played in a couple of rock bands in Cape Town. In was the main one, the Dirty South.
Okay, I've heard of them. Yeah.
Tim, who moved over to Mercury, and Eamon, the amazing sound guy from Mercury. Shout out to Eamon. And yeah, Johnny moved to England at the start of last year? Yeah, and
culmination. So you kind of came up in the band scene through that, or was that going on the same time as doing stuff like Bud and Bashes?
I would say it was like usually kind of one trumping the other, but both very simultaneous. Like I've been working, I would say, on Parabyl since like a year before ending high school. Maybe not so literally, but around that time, and Three Witches since about like right at the end of high school. So
and how did that come about? You guys go to school together, or do you find each other at gigs, or? Yeah,
no, we were at school together. Johnny he liked my beats, so he like sent me. It was like a very, like, once again, very young Leany kind of beat, but he sent over a vocal where he was doing like a what's the dude's name from Arctic Monkeys? Alex Turner.
Okay.
Just doing
I
like
was
an Alex
expecting
Turner
you to say,
vibe.
like, King Cruel, but cool. That sounds rad, actually.
Yeah, and so I was like, shit, this is dope, because I was listening to artists like Bones and Grief and a couple others at the time, and eventually artists like Little Peep, who are kind of blending the emo and the trap thing together.
Yeah.
So it went that way for a bit, and then it was like, we went like dubby, we went dancey. It's very like, I would say, eclectic kind of music.
Okay, so you guys didn't like have a sound per se. You just
Like
went with what vibe.
experimental pop kind of stuff. Always wanted it to play a bit like a Gorillaz album, where it's like lots of familiar stuff going on, but also like kind of whack and different.
But were you guys thinking like band's gonna make it, or was this just fun with a homie?
I think probably like a fair bit of both.
Okay.
But yeah, shit, the band making it part, I don't know. I've always been a bit of a pessimist about that.
A bit of a realist. What made you like? It's not pessimism; it's realism, because there's literally millions of musicians.
Yeah, I mean,
and, like, there's only so many that get listened to. So when did you realize that, or what kind of tipped you off to the fact that this was a bit of a long journey, that you weren't going to be a rock star like
I don't know. I think
a week after starting the band?
I think like I've always kind of known. So like my dad was a guitarist, and he was in some bands, and
Okay.
he was kind of like the whole absent father kind of vibe, and so he passed away when I was in junior school at some point, and kind of like but like broke on the street kind of vibes, and I realized like that probably happens to more people than people who end up having like hit CDs. And I think it took a while to set in, but like I always kind of knew like, just because you can play guitar nicely doesn't really, like, there's other shit you can fuck up,
So is that why you always have had the two careers kind of thing, or just like multiple things going at once?
Yeah, I think so. I also just, I get bored doing one thing too often. So it's got to be like, got to have different phases to move through. Like I'll go hard on some music for a while, and then kind of switch it up and maybe do some more like techie shit, and then maybe do like cover art for the music I was working on, and like can't just do one thing for too long.
And how, like, when did you discover that? Because that's something like, to get used to or comfortable with when you've got lots of interests, and knowing that there's like a time for each of them is something I'm only like really starting to understand now, that I don't have to be pushing all the stuff all the time, like that I can focus on different things at different times. So yeah, like that's a pretty mature thing to be doing. Or maybe I'm just immature. So yeah, have you always been that way, or what's the vibe?
I think like I've kind of always been that way to a degree, but more like with having like a proper 9 to 5 the last 2 years after waitering and doing kind of odd jobs since high school. I realized like at first I was super stressed about not making music, and then I was getting like apathetic about not having time to make music, and I like kind of stopped caring. And then I landed up somewhere in between, where after like a good maybe year in the job, I was like, cool, if I actually sit back and look, like I've made good use of this time, and like I feel for the most part fulfilled, and like like if I'm just not feeling it, might as well like steer myself in a different direction. Kind of same like I was saying with this year, where it's like if forcing it takes the fun out of it, then like why force it?
But like there is that whole thing that people say, like, like especially with writing, you look at someone like Stephen King, it's you get up in the morning and you start writing, and then you have lunch, and then you start writing again, and then you're done. Like that's their day. Like it's just constantly
Definitely.
doing
I mean,
thing.
there's that side of it too, and I think that's maybe what I'm feeling more guilty about this year, is that I haven't even just put in the time to make like the beats that I end up deleting in Ableton. But like I think like it's good to sit down and work on music, and I try and do that regularly, and I try and do that whether it be like DJing or producing or otherwise, just to get the hours in. But I think more the idea of like the magnum opus, and like why am I not having these like compelling ideas for a concept album that are just like flowing out of me, and I can't stop the music, whereas I gotta like sit and coax it out. that part of it, even in daily sessions, I think unwise to force, at least for me.
Yeah, I don't know where I stand on that sometimes, but like sometimes you just can't, like, or at least this year it's been one of those things where it's just, yeah, like we were saying earlier, it's just been impossible to be creative in certain spaces because of like just how overboard everything is. But then you see other people putting out so much dope stuff,
Yeah.
and but at the same time, a lot of those people had those, in the bank. Like they,
Oh, of course, yeah. And I mean, I've seen people who are like killing it the first couple months, and now they're nowhere to be found, and vice versa. And yeah, everyone's just really at their own pace, which is in some ways relieving at the moment, but it can be kind of hard to see it when you're comparing yourself to other people, you know.
Do you suffer with that at all? Like, is that a struggle for you? Because you seem like someone who probably wouldn't, but I don't know.
No, I heavily compare myself to other people, especially I think.
Seriously? Damn.
Yeah, it's
I honestly expected you to be someone who was more like at peace with himself, just
zen.
from, yeah, a bit more zen, I guess. But yeah, like, damn. Okay. Sorry, you were gonna say stuff there.
No, I think I've always been, number one, just like being known as a weird person, and I don't know if like I am actually a weird person, but I moved to Ireland for 2 years when I was a kid, and then came back, and between like, having like mixed parents and accents in different countries and stuff, I often like felt I stood out, and from that point of view, it's this kind of thing of like, oh, why can't I just be like that normal, cool, like nice person? I'd say that's like in a very general sense, more so with like, or on the other hand, with the music scene in South Africa, I think it's a lot easier to compare yourself to people, especially if you're someone who already does, because there's like these things are achievable, There's
that's dangerous. It's also motivating, but like that's the weird balance that you have to now play. It's like, they've achieved these things, so I know it's possible. But then if you don't achieve those things, you can't like hold yourself like, accountable, or not accountable, but like you can't like just flog yourself over it because there's so many other circumstances. But getting into the thing, you don't necessarily know that. Exactly. And it's also, maybe that's a bit of a cop-out for people who don't make it, but people don't make it sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it's like a numbers game. I remember, like when Tara got booked for a CTMF a couple of years ago, and we had kind of like come up together in the local music scene a fair bit, but I'd always felt she was a lot more confident with performance than me, and then she got booked, so I was kind of feeling this thing of like, what am I doing wrong, that it's not happening for me, and I just kind of realized
that's fucking relatable.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty normal, especially around people my age. But also realizing I kind of through that, I was like, maybe actually I just need to like wait my turn a little bit, and then the booking came up eventually, like a year or two later, and I think it'd be nice trying to compare myself to people less, or at least do so in a way that's like a positive thing.
Okay, I get that. And like, how do you do that? How do you actually turn that into a positive thing?
I mean, like in that case, instead of being like, oh, like, do I suck at performing compared to other people, you could be like, maybe it's my performance that needs work. So like, let me actually just like work on it instead of just being sad about feeling left out.
Yeah, I feel like you just called me out very hard there, just with the exact words you said, because that's always been my thing. Like when it comes to comedy, like I know I'm a pretty decent writer, but my performance is something like that's fluctuated a lot and does depend a lot on how I'm feeling, and I need to like, I don't know, next year we'll see how it goes, like but that's something I've got to figure out, is just how to like be comfortable on every single stage. And at this point in the game, like like I see other people who are there or are like 2 or 3 years in, and they are way more consistent, but then at the same time we're doing different things. So
it's also it's like some people like myself, I'm just not I'm not like made for performing, but I'll do it. And I think just also doing it, you realize like people only care if you're like really bad at it. You know, there's like a lot of leeway between passable and amazing, but like as long as you're not absolutely insufferable, it kind of works out.
Yeah, and even if you are insufferable, like I've seen some people manage to network their way into good positions.
Oh, yeah.
So
always happens.
Okay, since you're Mr. Facts, I want to know one fact to close this podcast that you've learned in lockdown that you want to share with people.
Fact I've learned in lockdown. Yeah, I definitely know some good ones.
Sorry, put you on the spot. I'll edit a little. Don't worry.
I've got one interesting fact, which is that owning exotic birds in South Africa is, if you want to like take them out for a walk and on a leash, you have to watch them like more, excuse my pun, like a hawk than any other animal, because there's so many diseases they can pick up from like eating other birds' poops, and all the local fauna, or not fauna, flora, are kind of like poisonous to them, and like you'll often end up risking harming yourself as well as the bird. So yeah, I think that's I don't know if that's a fun fact, but I think it's a fact.
Were you looking to get like an ostrich at home or something? Like,
no,
how do you know this?
A close friend has recently become the adoptive parent of 2 small, I think they're cockatiels. So I'm getting like the bird facts in and out the year at the moment.
Oh, well, yeah, so at least people now know that if they want to own exotic birds, they've got a bit more of an uphill battle. I think that's what they've tuned in for, you know? That's what they listen to this podcast for.
Yeah, I hope I haven't disappointed with my facts. I'm sure it'll come in handy to someone.
Bro, it 100% will. That's going to be something that's going to stick in someone's head in like 8 years' time. They're going to be like,
don't buy that bird.
I heard it on that podcast. Cool, bro. Well, thank you so much for doing this with me. Thank you for your time, for your honesty, for everything, for your support as well, man. Like, and
of course,
it's so like, I'm bummed with myself, but it's also super cool that like there was that thing back, you know, with your early stuff. Like that to me is just like super cool, because like when I heard Dispersion, I was just like, damn, this guy is good. Like, this is really, really fun. Like, this is really emotional. This is really like,
thank you.
Yeah, you managed to stir up things inside me with that EP album thing that everyone's doing these days.
No, it makes me very happy to hear. I appreciate it. And thank you so much for having me on. This is definitely my number 1 podcast, as well as probably the number 1 in South Africa, if we're being honest.
Hey, you said it, so I didn't have to. And with that, I think
we're going to end it.
Thank you, bro.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Yeah, dude, part of the cast and crew, and now guest. So you've actually got as many jobs as I do, basically.
Basically.
Cool. Later, bro.
Have a good one. Cheers.